πολλά. Σαν θα δείτε το πουλί μου χαιρετίσματα πολλά, με νεξέδες και ζουμπούλια και θαλάσσινα πουλιά. Η βάλα, πάμε γυαλό, γυαλό. Η βάλα, μόνο εσένα αγαπώ. Αν εσύ δεν με πιστεύεις, τα λουλούδια μαρτυρούν, σε μεγάλον όρκο βάλτα την αλήθεια να σου πουν. Σε μεγάλον όρκο βάλτα την αλήθεια να σου πουν. Αν εσύ δεν με πιστεύεις, τα λουλούδια μαρτυρούν. Η βάλα, πάμε γυαλό, γυαλό. Η βάλα, μόνο εσένα αγαπώ. Καμώνα σε λησμονήσω, μα η καρδιά μου σε πονεί. Σεις η πρώτη μου αγάπη, σεις εκεί παντοτινή. Σεις η πρώτη μου αγάπη, σεις εκεί παντοτινή. Καμώνα σε λησμονήσω, μα η καρδιά μου σε πονεί. Η βάλα, πάμε γυαλό, γυαλό. Η βάλα, μόνο εσένα αγαπώ. Η βάλα, πόσες φορές θα στο πω. Η βάλα, μόνο εσένα αγαπώ.
You're on, Nick.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Greek Community of Melbourne History and Culture seminar series. If you've got nothing to do Thursday evenings, there's always some seminar that we've got on for you that will be of interest. And as always, a special welcome for those who've been tuning into these seminars for the first time. Just a reminder for those who've registered via Zoom, at the end of the session, I will put in a request for questions. So use the chat function, the Q&A function, and submit any questions that you may have, and I'll convey those to the speaker. Also, just a reminder about next week's seminar. It's on Greco. That's a Greek language spoken in the Salerno district of Calabria in Italy as well. Another linguistics seminar not to be missed. Let's start with tonight's seminar, Memory Mapping and Historic Greek Communities of Istanbul by Dr. Gönül Bozoğlu. Memory mapping is about people and their relationship with place. It is essentially a collaborative enterprise which tries to engage with common issues of great urgency, like identity and belonging, ecology and stewardship. Memory maps are characterized by fusing so many modes of inquiry and imagination, rather than more purposeful approaches like research and inquiry. They demand processes of investigation and endless curiosity and an impulse towards wonder. This greater degree of spontaneity allows for wider appreciation of multi-century perception across cultures. Memory mapping attempts to explore issues of place identity and belonging that are increasingly associated with practice-based representations of locality. Although this both heterodox and more dynamic approach can give rise to a number of methodological issues, it does generate more empathetic outcomes and responses for the observer. In this presentation today, the community which has been examined and memory mapped is the Greek-speaking community of Istanbul. They are known in Turkish as Rumlar, derived from their self-designation as Romi, and the language is Rumca, as opposed to the Greeks of mainland Greece, who are Yunanlar and Yunanca, the modern Greek language. This is a declining community which comprises probably not more than 2,000 people today. In 1923, with the exchange of populations, the population was well over 100,000. Persecution over the years with the wealth tax imposed upon it, the 1955 pogroms have accelerated its demise. As a marginalized community, its experiences fall outside the main historical narrative celebrating the Turkish nation. The research aims of tonight's speaker is to engage with the heritages at risk of disappearance, to give voice to these communities, and to emphasize and valorize personal, affective, and individual understandings of their heritage. With this, can I extend a very welcome to Dr. Gönül Bozoğlu. Gönül, hoş geldiniz. Çok sıcak bir karşılama. Born in Izmir, Gönül commenced her tertiary studies at Mimar Sinan University in Istanbul, where she did a BA majoring in art history and archaeology, which was then followed by a master's degree in Ottoman history. Later, she completed the master's in museum studies at the University of Newcastle in the UK, and that was followed by a PhD in archaeology at Humboldt University in Berlin. With respect to her research activities, she undertakes research across heritage, memory, and museum studies, often combining anthropological methods with digital practice and filmmaking. She's the author of the book Museums, Emotion and Memory Culture, The Politics of the Past in Turkey, which was published by Routledge in 2019. You may be wondering why she chose the dwindling Greek community of Istanbul. Well, I'll let her give that away. I don't want to steal her thunder. Gönül, the floor is yours, and welcome once again.
Thank you. So I'll just put my presentation Okay, now can you see my presentation? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Nick. You already given a really nice summary to my talk. Thank you. And hello, everyone. And it's really lovely to talking to you. And I want to give big thanks to Nick Dallas and Kostas. Sorry, Kostas, I don't remember your surname. And the Greek community of Melbourne for organizing this. Actually, I was in Melbourne last year, just before COVID-19, but we didn't manage to make it work then. And there you go. A year later, we are in Zoom. So this is the structure of my talk. First of all, I should say who I am and why I'm doing this topic. I mean, Nick already gave my background, and as you can see, I have a very hybrid background. I should also add that I'm not a Greek studies scholar by training. I don't think of myself as an expert in Greek history, Turkish-Greek relations, or Greek communities. And in fact, I'm learning as I go on. And I'm also learning from the communities I work with. So my own position here is in some senses as an outsider, but as someone deeply interested in minority history in Turkey. I'm also interested in the ways in which different groups share histories. I don't mean that everyone has the same experience. As I will show, that isn't true. What I mean is that different groups often share the same place, sometimes peacefully, sometimes with tensions, sometimes both at the same time, because groups are not homogeneous. That place, Istanbul, has a social history that everyone should understand. And I will come back to this. So, people often ask me why I'm studying this. Although I should say that I don't get this question in Istanbul, because there has been a long-standing interaction between the Greek communities of Istanbul and Turkish groups. There are marriages, friendships, and also work collaboration between them. That doesn't mean that tension and marginalization doesn't exist, but there is also another side which I think is important. So I'll talk about my personal relationship. I have actually several reasons, but studying art history and archaeology in Istanbul has a big influence on me. I studied the Ottoman heritage of Istanbul, but I was also curious about Byzantine heritage. So I used to visit the Byzantine sites, which were mainly in the historic part of Istanbul, where Rum communities used to live. Nick already mentioned that, but I will come back to the term Rum in a minute. So I was curious about them too, sort of like, who are they? And they were very close, but very far away at the same time. So I used to also go to the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate in Fanar, and Fanar you might know in Greek, as in Greek. So when I was a student, I used to go there very often, and I was always very welcomed in the Patriarchate. So my time in the Patriarchate, the relationships that I established, their kindness affected me. So you don't need to be Christian or even religious person to go there. And if you think about it, it's nearly 1,700 years old, and it's very important for Istanbul's memory and heritage. So this interest was always with me. But there's another reason I began to this project. In my PhD and the book that came after, I explored state-level narratives, how certain museums tell particular stories about the Turkish nation, for example, talking about 1453 or Atatürk. So after thinking about all of these national level stories and how the state uses them, I wanted to explore heritage and memory at a different scale. So I also work a lot with the Greek communities of Istanbul in a previous in a previous project at Newcastle University, where colleagues and I looked at how different social groups in Istanbul live with the past in their everyday lives. So I got very interested in the histories of these communities, particularly the remaining Greek communities in Istanbul, but also the diaspora communities in Athens. For example, those who left Istanbul around 1964 and their children. So I also become very interested in a concept of heritage as something that can be very personal, even private, community-based, and not shown in a big, in big state museums. Instead, it can be found in people's living rooms and their personal photography collections. So my colleague, Laura Jane Smith, here actually in Australia, has developed a very influential concept in heritage studies that she calls authorized heritage discourse, or AHD. This is the idea that certain heritages become dominant. Only certain historical stories get told, and they only get told in a certain way. This is especially the case in countries where the government is interested in how the national past is presented, perhaps for political reasons. Another problem with AHD is that it can have the effect of silencing other histories. The authorities maybe don't think that these stories are important, or they don't like. These histories don't end up in museums, and they don't appear in heritage sites or in history lessons at school. My first book is definitely about AHD, but now I'm looking at the histories that we don't see. Perhaps unauthorized heritage, perhaps personal and small, but still vital for how people think about their lives and identities. And this is the case in many countries. So my research has moved from big museums with lots of visitors to the living room. So my research changed. But these are both places where people engage with the past and make sense of it. Somebody's personal collections of photographs and keepsakes obviously have a smaller audience, maybe just one person and their family and friends, but they can be profoundly meaningful, especially in situations of marginalization and displacement. Memory becomes very important. That memory can also be lost as generations pass. So what can we do about that? It's not of interest to national museums, so we need other methods. That's the theme of this talk. In my fieldwork, which means spending a lot of time in both Istanbul and Athens and interviewing them, going to events, religious services, and sometimes actually staying with families for long periods of time. As part of that, I also do walking interviews with community members in Istanbul, which is a really good way of understanding people's place memories and how they inhabit the past and the present at the same time. So I go on walks with participants and they decide where they want to go, tell me about places and memories that mean a lot to them. That way, I began to construct a complex map of the places that matter to people and to communities. So these are not always typical heritage sites recognized by authorities, but they're really important places in people's personal histories. I also do sedentary interviews in which people do what I call memory walking, which is remembering their old roots and the stories that they call up. Sometimes traumatic stories of violence and persecution. So memory walking is how people mentally retrace their steps, remember particular places, events, often is very in very vivid sensory detail. I'm interested in how people remember with their senses, how they evoke the places and times that were formative for them. I'll give you some examples later. So obviously memory walking is important for people who can't physically walk in the area that we are talking about, either because of mobility problems or because they're far away as part of diaspora, for example, in Athens. Sometimes people use photographs or objects in their memory walk. My ethnographic approach here is to spend as much time as possible with the communities. So although there are some recorded interviews, I think about data in a very broad sense, including my own experiences of being a guest within the community. I often sit with people and we look together at their own photographs or objects relating to Istanbul. Well, sometimes we drink ouzo and listen to old Istanbul songs. So the aim here is literally to map people's memory and senses of heritage, but also to think about where heritage is in a kind of network between stories, people, objects, images and meanings. So this is a way of providing a digital showcase for heritage that are missing from the official record. It is also a community resource that my participants feel very strongly about. In a sense, what I'm trying to capture is the memory world in which people live because of their personal and community histories. And what I mean by a memory world is the imaginative, sensory and storied world made by remembering people, particularly in situations of loss or change, in order to live with the past in the present and make sense of their experiences in personal and community dimensions. So my research is showing how people, especially older generations, make worlds of memory through communicating about the past, evoking sense memories, remembering people, places, practices, the banal details of everyday life, such as food, shopping, and church going, and sometimes their experiences of well-known historical events and pivotal moments. So this is what I'm doing, and now I need to provide just a bit of context. Some of this may be well known to people, but perhaps not to everyone. And Nick gave us a really good context at the beginning as well. Sometimes when I say to people what I work, when I say people that I work on Greek community of Istanbul, they assume that these are immigrants in the contemporary sense. It's confusing for people to think outside of the nation state box, which puts Turks in one place, modern day Turkey, and Greeks in another, modern day Greece. So we have to understand this history in a longer time frame and a more complex geography. And I spent a lot of time explaining that it's totally incorrect to think of the community like this. So as Nick said, in Turkish, the Greek communities sorry, are called Rum, which comes from Roman. This refers to Eastern Roman Empire, or what's also called the Byzantine Empire. And Greeks of Greece are called Yunan, which comes from actually Ionian. And you might, it is Romeos in Greek. But in English, people are not really familiar with Romeos or Rome, so often the word Greek is used. The language and the religion are the same, but they are now in different nation states. However, it is also complicated that in some families, some members live in Greece, while some live in Turkey, and actually some live in Australia. And I think the idea of nation state complicates it and makes it difficult for people, for many people to understand, because it's easy to lose a more complex picture of historical interactions, and if you go back enough, a different map of the world. So, and you might also know that Constantinople, well, modern day Istanbul, was conquered by the Ottomans in 1453, and the Greek Orthodox Church, which is the oldest Orthodox Church, and the community remained in the city after the conquest. And they played a significant role in the social and economic life of the city and in the political and diplomatic life of the Ottoman Empire. So today, community members emigrated to Istanbul at different times, for example, in 18th and 19th centuries, during the Ottoman period, from the Greek islands, Cappadocia, and other parts of Asia Minor. However, there was always a presence of this community since the Byzantine period. And as Nick said as well, it's a diminishing and aging community, and which has been subject to marginalization. And because of political persecution, many Greeks emigrated to Greece. Well, complicated to understand, but many of these are or were Greeks who had never lived in modern day Greece. Today, their population is about 2,000 and perhaps less in a city of 16 million. And many members of the community are worried about the future of this community in Istanbul. I mean, we can talk about this if there is interest in the question session. So here is the outline of some, not all, of the historical events that took place between Turkey and Greece that affected Istanbul's Greeks' political and social positions. And they are marked in white. The lists in the red is what the rooms, I mean, Greeks of Istanbul went through in the 20th century. I won't go through it all because I don't have time, but I will pick a few of them from this list. I just want to mention from the list, this Treaty of Ankara is an interesting and important one. So the Greek Prime Minister Venizelos and Turkish President Mustafa Kemal signed this agreement to normalize the historically problematic relations between the two countries. And in my data, it also comes out that they say between 1930 and 40, about 10 years were the golden years for the community. Unfortunately, this was repealed in 1964, and I will talk about the deportation of Greek nationals in relation to a story later on. So I'll just give some examples, as I said. So this is one of example of 20th century community voice politics in Turkey. This is about suppressing both the real and the political voice of the community. Some of my respondents in Istanbul, in Athens, the very old generation, actually still speak quietly and lean into you if they want to say anything about politics. So as I said, there are other moments that I could talk about, for example, difficulties about protecting property rights for minority religious organizations in the 20s. But what I want to help you to understand is that there's a long history of marginalization of the Greek community through different legal, political, and social process. A key reference that I want to introduce quickly is the pogrom of 1955. So on 5th of September 1955, fake news was released about the bombing of the Turkish consulate and the birthplace of Atatürk in Greece's second largest city, Thessaloniki. This is at the time of Adnan Menderes' government. So some organized nationalist groups that included actually non-organized ones who just joined the lootings, attacked the homes and businesses of the Greeks of Istanbul. Thousands of shops and houses were plundered, churches, cemeteries, and schools were also vandalized. So this is one of the churches where I work with people. I won't name it because I haven't got the permission yet. So the church yard is still in a chaotic chaotic state and has not changed since it was pillaged in 1955. But this is, I will explain, this is in the backyard. So now volunteers are cataloging the rubble. This is one of my participants showing me the damage to one of the old church doors after people tried to prise it open during the attack in 1955. The church today has been restored, but what you see here is the original pieces from the previous church in the backyard. But when you go to the church, you don't see this. So 1955 often appears in my data. Some people don't want to talk about this, but some people start their conversation with this. For example, I heard that a woman who lives in Athens now takes sleeping tablets on the anniversary of 1955. But it's also not straightforward. So I hear more complex stories. So in the memory records, some Greeks remember emotionally the Turks who tried to protect them. So I was, I never forget this story. So I was having dinner in my friend's house in Istanbul, and his father was sitting next to me. I did not ask anything about 1955 to him, but he just started telling me about his experience during the attacks. He was somewhere in Bozoğlu in Istanbul, and attackers were nearby. There was a bekçi, a guard in each neighborhood in Istanbul, who was one of the last Ottoman guards, retired and old. I think his name was Osman. And he put himself in front of the crowd and said, first, you need to you need to kill me, then you can touch the rooms. And apparently he shouted in the street. When he said that, the tears were in eyes of my friend's father, and his voice trembled. So, he actually kind of screamed when he cried. So, of course, we need to think of this as a horrible act of violence, but people's stories also show other sides. Well, one of my participants put in these words, said, there were thorns in Istanbul, but also roses. So, and he's a diaspora who lives in Athens now, and actually he published his memoirs with this title in Greek. So, and some Turkish media outlets call the most shameful night that this land has seen. This is, this sort of things come in the anniversaries of 1955. But of course, this doesn't appear in all media. And certain medias talk about this. And in recent years, there is a joint commemoration that takes place, organized by the Ecumenical Federation of Constantinopolitans, joined by the President Nikos Uzunoğlu and the Mayor of Princess Islands, in which the Mayor Erdemgül participates as well. So they do sort of live Skype joint commemoration. So the final event I'll talk about is the 1964 expulsion of people with Greek citizenship in 1964 as part of an attempt by the Turkish state to put pressure on Greece during the Cyprus conflict. The New York Times article from 1964 gives a sense of this. It explains how lists of expellees were drawn up and people were given a week to leave, able to take with them only $20 and 20 kilos of possessions, which explains the title of this exhibition in 2014 in Istanbul. So this also shows that there is interest in this history in Turkey, but to my knowledge, it is not documented in any state or local authority museums. And there are also really good books published in Turkish about this 1964, and also about pogrom and other histories that I showed in the timelines. Unfortunately, not many in English. So that goes back to the point that I made at the beginning, that this is not just a limited community history issue, but has relevance for everyone connected to Istanbul, to help us understand the social and political history of the city, and to make sure certain stories don't get lost. Whatever group people think they are from in Istanbul, they share the city, and it is very important to understand what has happened there over time. So, so now I'll just give you some examples of sort of kinds of interview I do. So, and how vividly people remember. I mean, often I do the interviews in Athens and they describe me the place, I don't know, shop or street or house, and their description is so clear. So when I go back to Istanbul, I usually find the place, and like the one in the picture, actually, I was described about this place, this shop, this street in Athens, and then I went back to Istanbul and I found it. So, and this is Dimitris, who is from Istanbul, but had to leave with his parents in 1964. He now lives in Athens. We will meet him again later, and his daughter as well. This is just a tiny bit of an interview, and I want to show it to you to give you a sense of just how vivid the memory is. Even in terms of an old street sign about how steep the road was in a certain place, and how rich in terms of sensory detail, the smell of bread, the taste of strawberries, the memory of a beautiful girl. It is like he is reconstructing in his memory what it felt like to be there at that time. And when he tells these stories, it's a way of preserving that. It's also not just about what he says, but how he says it. Sometimes with his body language and tone of voice, sometimes with photographs and keepsakes. In his house in Athens, for example, one corner of the living room is a kind of Istanbul corner, almost like a little museum. Well, I have the recording here, but I won't play it. Okay, so just... Okay, apart from interviews, I also look at memoirs written by Greeks of Istanbul and mainly by diasporic groups. These are being published by Istos, a Istanbuli Greek publishing house, and established in 2011 to, and now I quote, to contribute to the studies on the history, culture, and life of the Greeks and the city, Istanbul, to revive the tradition of publication that has been interrupted for decades. So the publishing house says that it does this because it is interested in countering a romantic and nostalgic perspective on Greek culture in Istanbul, which it says is an inefficient mode of remembering since the community is still there. I mean, we'll come back to this later on. So also what they say is Istos is not only a publishing house, but also a cultural focus for the Greek community in Istanbul. So we choose the name Istos, which means network. Apart from the memoirs, some of them wrote or still writing blogs, as you see one of them on the slide. So it is important for me to engage with Istos because it represents a cultural memory in various ways. Istos makes films, has a choir that sings in Greek, although the choir also includes Turkish people. They organize language courses and events on the Greeks of Istanbul. I must say, it's not a big group, but what they've been doing is quite impressive. And they actually recently won 2 awards for their documentary films in prestigious festivals in Istanbul and Antalya. They are the most prestigious ones in Turkey. So apart from Istos, I'm also working with the Patriarchate in Istanbul, the Bozoğlu Hospital, and the Ecumenical Federation of Constantinopolitans in Athens. So in my work, I'm trying to draw together a number of different sites, networks, and my own participants' voices. So now I want to show you what I do with this in the memory map I'm creating. I mean, it's still in the development phase, and I'm adding more stories and more sites and objects, through the time, and I have more time to work on this. So these are, well, I'm going to show you some screenshots, and the URL is at the side if you would like to have a look later. Unfortunately, I am very sorry to say that just before this talk, Newcastle University, including some other UK universities, sustain a cyber attack, meaning that the website is currently down. So I understand the IT people are working hard to get all of the attacked sites back up, and I hope you can have a look before too long. So this is a map which geolocates particular things that you can search with: stories, sites, sounds, dates, images, and objects. So I'll give you some examples that will both show you how the map works and give you a sense of some of my material that I'm collecting. So here is a story about Galata Harbor. Well, it could be called Karaköy now. So you can see that at the top of the precise location, I think it's, I don't know if you can see it. So there is a precise location of the story on the stories on the top is tagged. And that is, the story is linked to other themes like Cyprus. So I'll read it for you because it might be difficult to, difficult for you to read. So Maria is in her 80s. She's a retired teacher from a Greek school in Istanbul who emigrated to Athens after she retired in 1990s. Hold on, sorry, I can't really read here. I'll just open it here. Maria is in her 80s. She's a retired teacher from a Greek school in Istanbul who emigrated to Athens after she retired in 1990s. Many members of her family were already in Athens. She went to university in Greece and finished in 1957. Maria pointed out that in those years there were political tensions between Turkey and Greece relating to the conflict over Cyprus. After she finished university, she went back to Istanbul by ship. She arrived in the harbor in Galata. She had a big suitcase holding many books, newspapers, and magazines. At customs, books, magazines, and newspapers were often checked to see if they were political. Maria said she wasn't sure if her newspapers or magazines included anything that could turn out to be a problem, but she wasn't worried about it. Unfortunately, Maria ended up in a line where the officer was well known for her strict rules, making it quite likely that Maria's luggage would be checked. Maria's sister, who was waiting for her at the harbor, was worried. When Maria's turn came, the notorious officer asked what she was doing. When Maria said she had just finished her study in philosophy and literature, the female officer said to her, a woman who reads philosophy would not lie, and let her go through without checking Maria's possessions. When she told me about this, tears came to her eyes, her voice trembled, and she said, I still get excited and feel emotional when I think about that moment. Who knows, maybe she wanted to study philosophy, but couldn't. So the idea for this is that these are written in simple language. In museums, we have to write very clear labels, and I use the same approach for this map. So I will like to give you another example. So this is about the chandelier. This chandelier is in Athanasius's home in Athens. He brought it in the 1980s, 1980s from his family's flat in Afrikahan, a well-known inn in Bozoğlu, Istanbul. The chandelier was a wedding gift to his grandfather from one of his closest friends, a chef at the famous Tokatlion Hotel. Athanasios's grandfather married in 1914 in Kadıköy in Istanbul. He worked as an electrician who did the electrics of the Afrikahan, where he later lived. A man called Ragıp Pasha built and owned the Han. According to Athanasios, he rented out the inn to non-Muslims. Athanasios said his chandelier is important to him because it reminds him of Istanbul. It now hangs from the ceiling of his bedroom in Athens, but in the old days, it was in the living room. He remembers doing his homework underneath it. He was attending Zapyon Greek school at the time. He said there was another living room, but it was closed to him since it was only open for guests. So he spent a lot of time under the chandelier. When he hung it in his new home in Athens, he had to shorten the long chain quite a lot, as it was designed for the high ceilings flats in Bozoğlu. So this is an example of something that is quite a humble object in some ways, but is very meaningful within the memory world of the participants and links to key social history events, but also emotionally to his own personal memories of change and adaptation, and how this is almost embodied in the journey that the chandelier has made. I mean, you can see more pictures if you scroll down on the page, hopefully later on when it's available. So I'm also collecting sounds, and when you visit the website, you can hear it. And this is the sound of Thanasis and me walking up the stairs and into the classroom of the Fanar Greek Orthodox High School in the Fanar neighborhood of Istanbul. You can hear him unlocking the doors too. The school dates from 1454, 1 year after the conquest of Constantinople, when it was opened by the Patriarch educate the children of Orthodox community. Today's building, sometimes known as the Red Castle, dates from 1883. Today, there are only about 40-50 students attending the school because the population of the Greek community has declined. Many of the Greeks who left Istanbul for Athens attended this school and are members of graduate associations. And schools, churches, and hospitals are actually key sites within the memory map. And this is what you see when you scroll down, and these are the photos from the school. And one on the left is the photo of Thanasis, who is 82, sitting where he used to sit. And on the bottom, you see Thanasis shows me the chairs that he remembers from his childhood. He and his fellow students will play with these chairs, stacking them up like dominoes before making them fall. So this is the last example I want to show you because it represents a transgenerational memory, and because it links to the film that I will talk about soon. This is the daughter of Dimitris, whom we have already met. So Elena is the daughter of Dimitris, who left Istanbul for Athens in 1964 when holders of Greek passports were deported from the city. Dimitris talked often to his daughter of Istanbul. She was born in Athens and has lived all of her life there. Once she traveled to Istanbul and took the tram from Atatürk Airport. When the tram passed through the ancient walls of Constantinople, she recognized them from her father's stories. I feel this nostalgia through my dad, but for me, it was even stranger. But it was even stronger because I had all this historical approach of the walls, and then it's when you get to the walls, it's like that is the city, you know, that is the city. So I started crying. because I feel this nostalgia through my dad, because he comes from there. So for me, it is two layers. I understand the history, but it is also my personal family story. I know that my dad is attached to this city, and I know he always wants to go back. I know his best years, his childhood, his more like carefree years were spent there. He said, "Now I'm going to show you my place." And he took me to all the places. He took me to Samatya, where he was born. That is the city as I saw it through my dad's eyes. He would take me to all the places and he would tell me nice stories. So it was like everything was perfect. I think Greek people, my dad and my grandmother, they all have this very idealized view. I don't know if it is. Maybe a large part of it is also true, but they always focus on the good things, like they want to see it as something magical and idealized. Yes, in a very beautiful way. So I don't have time to go into memory dynamics of this, how it changes over generations and into questions of nostalgia and romanticized remembering. This is an important thing to think about, and actually the Greek Istanbuli communities in Istanbul itself and in Athens have different relationships with the city. If anyone is interested, we can talk about this during the questions. Again, my aim is to understand how and understand and show these different memory experiences and show that this is not a homogeneous community. So if you click on the site tab, you see the locations of the stories. For the moment in Istanbul and Athens. In future, the map can be populated with other diaspora allocations if I come across with any people. So in future, I mean, I'm interested in looking at other sites like the islands of, Gökçeada, Imbros, and Bozcaada, Tenedos. And indeed, if there is an opportunity to think about and work with the Greek Istanbul diaspora in Australia. So now I will talk about the film. So this is a story that I've been following and filming with my colleague, the filmmaker Cem Hakverdi, who's based at Istanbul Bilgi University. And this story just emerged during my field work. So as we have learned, Dimitris's parents were deported to Athens in 1964 and died there. Before they died, they told their son that they wanted to be buried in Istanbul. And he managed to do this earlier this year, just before COVID-19. And Cem and I managed to film that process. So we took a bus from Athens to Istanbul, carried the bones, and we did the reburial ceremony in Balıklı cemetery, which is a very old, historic Greek cemetery in Istanbul. So this was an opportunity to tell Dimitris' story, but also to tell wider stories about the Greek communities of Istanbul through working from people's memories to social histories and back again, to show the meaning of Istanbul for people who have left, but also what it means for the Greek community that has remained. The film is a way of showing the interaction of personal histories and memory with bigger social political histories, but above all, doing so in a way that is not really academic in the traditional sense. It is the communities that do the talking, and I never appear. You never hear my voice giving historical background, and we try to tell all of the stories through people's memories, voices, and journeys. I also believe that the film will have more effect and impact than any other academic books. So the film is not finished. Well, Cem and I almost finished the Istanbul part, and I'm in Istanbul now and still getting on with the film with Cem. But there is more to do in Athens, just one more trip. But at the moment we can't travel there. So once we can manage to go to Greece, we will finish the film. But I can show you a trailer that we made in a moment, but this trailer comes from only the first filming in Athens, doesn't have Istanbul yet. So we will do that after the presentation. And I'll just come to my final comments to finish. So in my experience of fieldwork in Istanbul and Greece, I have been welcomed, and lots of people stress that we are connected at a human level, and it is the international tensions and geopolitics that divide us in a way that isn't real for everyone. I think the kind of attention to personal and community histories that I'm trying to do can help to show and what people have been through, but also help others to identify and make connections to their lives and others. That's not going to solve international tensions between countries, but it is a way of working at a different level to encourage historical awareness that is in an important part of everyday peace and human connections. It is only by understanding how different groups have interacted and intersected in the past that we can begin to understand our situations and positions today, creating the possibility for senses of connections. So, I mean, I don't have time to go through all these details, but I mean, whenever I visit Greece, I don't know, in Crete or anywhere else in Greece, I always have very interesting emotional encounter that happens to me. So, and now I will exit the presentation, and I hope we can watch the trailer, which is just, I think, 3 minutes long. So I will just stop sharing. And I'll pass it to you, Nick or Costa.
Costa, can you wave your magic?
İstanbul. Memleketim, doğduğum yer, çok sevdiğim bir yer. Eski İstanbulluları çok hasret ediyorum. Artık yoklar.
Bu toplum büyük bir göçe uğradıktan sonra buraya geldiği zaman İstanbul'daki geleneklerini devam ettirmeye çalışıyor.
Bir kız vardı aşağıda, rıhtımda. Bana bir mendil sallıyordu. Belki başkası da sallıyordu. Ama o kızı bana sallıyordu diye düşündüm. Ama bunu biliyordum. Yani Galata Okulu'nun okulda öyle bir öğrenciymiş. Yani öyle sandım. Bak dedim, bu beni seviyordu. Ben bunu bilmiyordum. Öyle sandım. Bak, sandım. Size bir hafta süre veriyoruz. Alın malınızı, yani bir çanta içinde, yani mal mülkü değil, bir çanta içinde alın ama kıymetli şeyler almayacaksınız. Eşyalar filan ve $500.
Biz oradayken gavur diyorlardı. Buraya geldiğimizde Türk tohumu diyorlardı. Yani orada da memnun değildik aslında. Çünkü yabancıymışız gibi bakıyorlardı. Buraya geldiğimizde de aynı şey.
İlk başta, yeni geldiğimizde ondan sonra biz kendimizi yani gösterdik.
Ben öldüğüm zaman beni oraya götüreceksiniz. Anladınız mı? Öyle konuşuyordu annem. Beni burada gömmeyeceksiniz. Orada. Anne ya öyle olmaz. Çok para istiyor yani cenaze. Yani öyle konuştum annemle. Neyse beni oraya gideceksin. Akrabalarımın yanında olmak istiyorum dedi. Annemin babamın yanında. Onu şimdi yapıyorum.
Thank you, Gönül, for that fascinating presentation. And in times of Greek-Turkish tensions, it's really heartwarming to see people out there trying to build bridges between the two communities. The floor is open to questions. I think they'll start flowing very soon, but before they do, let me kickstart off the questioning. You'd mentioned during the course of the presentation that many people had Greek passports, but at the same time, these citizens of Istanbul, they've always been in Istanbul. Their families have always been in Istanbul, or they moved to Istanbul from other parts of the Ottoman Empire. How did they acquire those Greek passports? How did they acquire them? Was that initiative from Greek consular authorities? Did they have to renounce their Turkish citizenship, or they were allowed to have a dual citizenship? Can you sort of elaborate on that?
I think it was quite complicated because, you know, as you said, and as I said, some Greeks emigrated from part of what's called Greece today in 19th century. So they, when this Greek state established, they had Greek citizenship, but these people never been to Greece, so they were in Istanbul, and with the Treaty of Ankara, actually it allowed them to, you know, just stay in Istanbul and you know, just be like citizen. So it wasn't an issue until 1964 when the Turkish government repealed the agreement, and they just said, okay, with people with Greek passports have to leave in 1 week time. And I think they weren't given a dual citizenship option. But there are sort of, I heard different stories. Some say they were sort of given option, okay, you have to take this or that, you know, like Turkish citizenship or Greek citizenship. But some say they weren't. So, but they were only given 1 week to go, and there were 10,000 people with Greek passports, but they were married to, it's, as I said, it's really complicated. You don't see yourself or Greek or, you know, Turkish or anything. You're just from Istanbul, and of course you're married to rooms with Turkish passports. Even some of them apparently married to Turkish people. But what happened was it ended up with 30,000 people who left the city because of marriages and, you know, relationship. And in fact, some Turkish people had to leave because their husbands or wives had Greek citizenship.
Thank you for that. The questions are coming in thick and fast. A question from Serjan. Thank you for the great presentation. My question is about language. As you said, the population of Greek communities has declined. What about the language? Do you have any observation about the language? Has there been, it's a question about language maintenance. Have they been able to retain it? Or as we saw in last week's presentation, Turkish sort of dominates?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a linguist, and I'm learning Greek. And for example, so there's one site that some Turkish people are actually learning Greek. You know, there is a really good course in Istanbul. I mean, I think there are several courses, but one of them is in the embassy. And what I heard was, you know, they had, you know, students every year. And with ISTOS, they also have language workshops. And obviously this room community speak Greek. But this language is a very interesting thing. They also speak Turkish. So, and also, I think it also depends on the generation. Young generation in Istanbul speak perfect Turkish. I mean, you can't even hear accent or anything. Some of them also speak perfect Greek, but maybe some less Greek or less Turkish. But with the older generations here in Istanbul, it's mixed. Maybe they speak better Greek and more broken Turkish. But I mean, in general, everyone speaks Turkish. And it's interesting for example, diaspora Greeks that I met, they also like speaking in Turkish, and they try to keep their Turkish as well, because for them, okay, Greek is, you know, quite dominant because they use Greek in everyday lives, but their Turkish is disappearing. And sometimes I get surprised. I'm like, well, you still speak really good Turkish, how does it happen? And they say, well, we keep it up, and we watch Turkish soap operas and watch Turkish TV, and actually we are here, but some said our ears and our eyes are, in Turkey. So there is actually this also linguistic connection is happening there. But here, what I hear is it's the case for Armenian, because in the schools, in Greek schools or in an Armenian school, they are taught in their languages, but certain lessons are in Turkish. So. But of course, this is I think the feature of Greek is also related to the community. I mean, we can always, have interest, Turkish people can learn and stuff. But of course, if the community is diminishing, and of course, the language is diminishing as well, which is a shame because, Greek was spoken in Turkey, not just Istanbul. I mean, in other parts of Turkey, it was spoken for centuries. So it's something will be shame if we lose that.
Question from Evan. How do current generation of young Istanbulers see the events of September 1955, the September events?
Yeah, this is interesting thing. I spoke to some young generations in Athens. Obviously, they were born in Athens, and as I showed the example, they know Istanbul through their parents. Often, they don't talk about 1955. And often what I hear is many diaspora members don't tell traumatic events. But here, like just recently, I spoke to a young Greek woman, and 1955 came straight away. And in fact, she said her mom was small in 1955, and she told me about her experience, but it wasn't really vivid. So she told me, okay, that's what I know. But she said, let's talk to my mother. So now she's arranging, then we will meet, and not just about 1955, about other memories as well. But here, I think people, in my experience, think about more than in diaspora. I mean, this is just my experience. I can't generalize it. This is just, what I met in Athens and what I met here. But it's not, I mean, as I said, it's not it's a well-known event now. I mean, 15 years ago, I mean, I didn't know anything about this, as a Turkish citizen. And I was like, okay, 1955, I don't know. But after 1995 in Turkey, we start to have more books and also, magazines about this recent history of Turkey. And some novels start to come up and some research. So actually that helped us to, see what has happened in this country or in Istanbul.
There is a comment from Alexandra, can't wait for the film. So please keep us in touch when it does get released. And I know that one of our board members, Jim Bosinakis, who's also involved with the annual film festival, is following this presentation. So Jim may be looking to having it to next year's film festival. This year's was cancelled, but we'll make up for it next year.
We just need one permission to go to Greece, and I don't know if anyone hears us from the embassy, please give us a permission so we can go and do the filming and come back. Promise we won't have any fun or anything like that. We'll just do our filming and come back.
Well, we'll see what we can do on that point. There's also
I'm joking, but yeah, only that. So because we really want to finish it, because it's and we are you don't want to live work for a long time because you're into it, our participants are into it, my colleague Jem, me. Now we just want to get it done, and hopefully we'll be ready for your next festival.
In your last hurdle, so of course you need to finish it. Now, could you please give a link to the website where you have the stories? If you can just sort of share that later on with the
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
As I said, there is a technical problem. It's related to cyber attack in the UK. So some of our links related to the university are not working, and this website is also stored in the Newcastle University system. So hopefully, soon it will be solved, because all that I've been putting a lot of stories and photographs, and suddenly it's gone. I feel quite upset, but yeah, hopefully it will be solved soon.
Okay, and a question from Hussein. Thank you for your presentation, very interesting topic. To what extent do you see this creative or scientific work you shared on cultural heritage acting as a peace platform? What else could be done?
So I think, yeah, as I said, we don't have platforms in museums really. I'm not like in museums in especially in the big ones. We have these stories, and as a researcher, as a person working cultural heritage, I'm interested in this. So what do? First of all, I'm not a digital person by training or interest, traditionally I do research, and then of course I publish as a book, and I will write a book about this because it's also necessary to communicate in the academic world and etc. But you want to reach out wider audiences, and then I start to think about digital practices and filmmaking. I mean, as I said, I start to be involved in filming because of this issue of communication with wider people. So and digital platform really helps for that. Now, you in Australia or people in Greece or here in Turkey, they can all look at the website and watch the film, and this will be obviously related to my research. So it's a good way of showing your work. And don't be afraid. I was a bit like, oh my God, digital stuff, I have no idea. But actually, today you can do a lot with very simple technology. And film creates platform for identification and empathy as well. So that's why I also chose to make a film, and I was lucky to work with Jem to, show this side of research through film.
I've got a question from Spiridula. Thank you for an edifying presentation. Would you say that religion remains the main cultural signifier of Greek people living in Istanbul today?
Sorry, if it's...
The main cultural signifier, is it the main thing that sort of...
Yeah. I mean, the religion thing is a very interesting for minorities. I mean, I think we should separate the meaning of religion in Istanbul in a minority case than religion meaning in Greece. I see this tension with Greeks of Greece who are not religious, and their issues with secularism and their relationship with Orthodox culture, and so I see that when I go to Athens. But here, I think, like for example, the Patriarchate and those churches, they're part of identity and they're part of heritage. I mean, even as I said, I'm not a religious person or anything, but I go to these places because these are the places where communities, have their space. I mean, when I start talking to people about their memories, this, especially churchyards, come out a lot. Like how when they were children, they used to play in the churchyards, and they interacted with the adults and with priests and and with the people. So I mean, I tell one story, for example, like in the previous work, I work with some Armenians, and there was a very secular, lefty, in fact, atheist Armenian. But he said they still go to a church because it's about, your space in the community. And he said, sometimes it doesn't matter it's a Greek or Armenian church, we still go. Like they live in one of the Princess Islands, and there's a Greek Orthodox church nearby, and they go there because it says it's very important that, the door opens, the air comes, and your breathe makes it alive. So it was a really nice way of describing the process. So it's not about that religion, but also it's about actually this is your heritage. I don't know if it makes sense. So it's part of your cultural heritage. It doesn't matter you're religious or not. And of course, in Greek culture, Orthodox religion has got big influence, like in many countries, which is normal. But as I said, the relationship with the religion is a little bit different here than in Greece because of the situation and being in minority and having your space there. This is your space, basically, completely your space.
Gönül, I was in Istanbul recently in January, and I've sort of heard another part of the story, because that religious identity is so closely tied with the Greek community there. It has to be, because that's what the patriarchate is and so forth. The community over time has also been very insular, even marginalizing other Greeks who might have involved mixed marriages or whatever, or weren't that religiously inclined, because, as I said, it's so, it identifies so much with that community. So anyway, but I won't get away from straight from the discussion. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just want to also say, like, with the minority groups in particular, I mean, it's the case for all groups. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, Turks are like this, Greeks are like this. I mean, this is the problem of the era. English are like that. I mean, we're not all like that or this, or, we are different. So, and it's the same for the Greek. I mean, I always say Greek communities of Istanbul. I try not to use just community, because it's a diverse group. It's inevitable that some are more religious, some are secular, some are lefty. Sometimes actually they get stuck. I hear that with the new generations in particular. I mean, they don't want to maybe be a religious like their grandmother or father. They just, want to, I mean, they also engage with Turkish people, they are in a lefty group or whatever, and they want to be something else, and let them be like this. So I think we should recognize the diversity of the community, if it's possible.
There's also, let's call it advice from someone. Please tell Gönül she needs to come to Australia.
Oh, nice.
This is a directive. There's a large community of Imbrians and Tenerians here with stories that need to be mapped. So,
I love Australia. I've been there. I stayed 3 months, and I only stayed 1 week in Melbourne, and I love Melbourne a lot. And of course, as you can imagine, when I saw all these Greek things, I was quite interested. And yeah, I hope so.
Okay. Next one, I think, is more a comment from George Svogaras.
That's nice, sure.
Thank you very much for this, Gönül organisers. I'm not sure where George is based. I have very moving stories from my father, who was born in Istanbul. My artwork revolves around his experiences, and my mother's background is from Izmir. Most recently, I've been working in Jerusalem. Both parents were relocated to Crete when very young. I recently started a document regarding reconciliation stories and would be grateful for any contributions. It's an open document which I'm hoping will grow, and you shared the documents. So, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good. And I don't know. I can give my email address or.
Yeah. If you need to get in contact with Gönül, just send an email to the Greek community in Melbourne. Hopefully, we'll be sort of hosting this this seminar, this video, this recording for sort of future views as well, and we'll also put the link to that website once it gets reactivated. And yeah,
and if they type my name, actually it appears on the internet, because I have a a staff page which includes the email address as well. And George, I think, says he's based in the UK. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I also say that this is also cutting edge research. Very little work has been done on memory mapping. If you just type memory mapping Greeks or whatever, probably Gönül will come up as probably the first.
Wow. Well, it's good, but also puts a lot of pressure on me.
Actually, the first thing will probably be Greek Community of Melbourne seminar on Melbourne mapping, and then maybe Gönül. So
okay, that's good.
She's been doing a very good job lately in sort of making sure we get those high hits. And, yeah. Okay, I think we might bring the presentation to the end. Thank you everyone for participating and joining in. Çok teşekkür. Parakalo. And hopefully, maybe we'll have you here next year's film festival, you know, so. Yeah.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you. Thank you for organizing it. And, you know, I always enjoy interacting in a such group. You know, it's also it enriches my thinking. And it's always nice to share, you know.
And everyone, don't forget next week's presentation on Greco, same bat time, same bat station, will be here. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.